as good as new. Next morning I was loaded on a wagon with some others who all seemed to be in more distress than I could claim. Yet by the time we bumped our way across Virginia into Washington, I felt no better than my comrades. We were put in clean beds in a hospital, and there I spent my summer, neither getting well nor failing. When fall came, I had new orders releasing me from service. I stayed on until hard weather softened into spring, just days before the Appomattox meeting ended it all. A poet fellow helped me make arrangements for the journey home, the same who had given me help in writing letters, and here I came the second week in April, in time to learn of Mr. Lincoln's death. I tried to settle in my father's house, but for a second time he was a widower, and had no womenfolk who could look after the son he thought would come home fit to help him keep the farm. So then I turned to Eunice, who took me in though she was in her bridehood. And here I've lain for nearly 30 months, slowly losing heart as life drains out my soldier's wound. Ruth visits, and my pa, who comes less often now, he started courting for a third wife. I wish him well, and yet it doesn't seem quite right that he at 60 is looking to begin again, while I, who haven't yet reached 30, feel my time is growing short. No need to talk of honor or duty, or those other words we hear, before the troubled time came to an end. What's done is done, and I'll be satisfied to sink away some snowy night this winter, if only Ruth could give me up and find another man, or else turn sour and plain, so that it wouldn't bring my heart to watch her days she comes to call, the fading days and years, and life she meant to cherish.
When I was 12, I knew about my name. We learned Ruth's song that year at Sunday school, and even then, I wondered whether someday I wouldn't find my naming was an omen. As if my mother knew when I was born the time would come for me to feel the sadness that struck the other Ruth. And yet when I saw Ben, it never crossed my mind that he could be a man to fail before his time, or that the trouble down at Harper's Ferry was omen in itself of war to come. My trouble that fall was waiting for my birthday, which wouldn't be until the Christmas season, and then I'd be 16. My father said that once I reached 16, I could have callers, but then I'd see Ben in turn in September, and after that, I dreaded Saturdays, knowing I might be in town and see him, knowing I couldn't show him with my eyes I wanted him to notice me. I waited. My birthday came and passed, and also Christmas, and winter, spring, summer, and although the callers came on Sunday afternoons, I hadn't found a way to make Ben notice and ask my name and join the Sunday throng. I waited until Fair Week came in August. Ben had a trotting horse he came to race, but then it turned up lame, and so he walked about the fairgrounds with the air of one who felt no disappointment or distress, as if the race he'd waited for all summer was no more to him than a sleigh ride missed. Except he kept alone, who nearly always was the center of a pack of friends. I was helping keep our church's booth, and Ben came by pretending to find interest in pickles, maple syrup, jams, and quilts. Somehow I didn't blush or even falter. We talked politely, then he went away, and then came back to buy a gift, he said, a quart of maple syrup for his folks, and went away, and came again confused, not knowing why he came or what to say to make his reappearance seem quite natural. He came the next night, and again the next, and Sunday came to our church, though his own was miles closer to his father's farm. He asked if he could call that afternoon, and hardly missed a Sunday after that until he left in spring of '62. By Christmas time, I'd lost my other callers, except for Robert Morgan, who still hoped I'd end by choosing one who'd been to college instead of Ben, who only kept a farm. When winter ended, we knew war was coming, but didn't think it something that would touch us. At least I didn't, not considering Ben might have to leave the country for the fight. We'd kissed by then, but hadn't done much talking, because it seemed we'd settled our affairs without the need of words. I knew that once December came again and I was 18, we'd make our plans to marry in the spring. So all that summer was a happy time of picnics, berrying, buggy rides, church socials, Ben in our parlor Sunday afternoon, and still no thought of what was further south. But in the fall, I saw that Ben was troubled to think there was war that needed fighting while he was buggy riding with his girl. One night, he came when he was not expected and asked me whether we could talk alone. which we did often, so that when he asked, I knew already. First, he said he loved me and hoped I would consent to be his wife. But if I would, he had another thing to ask. He said he couldn't take a bride until he'd done his part with other men who now were leaving Lewis County for the war. He said he meant to spend the winter here, helping his father and his ailing stepmom, but come the spring, he felt he must enlist. We didn't tell my folks until my birthday, and then with matters settled openly, contrived to spend the winter without thinking of what the spring would bring. We did quite well until the day grew close for Ben's enlistment. Even then we did all right, I guess, except I cried myself to sleep most nights, and when we were together we pretended a silliness that neither of us felt. Ben left with 7 other men in May, of whom all 8 came back in '65. One with a cane, another with an eye patch, another with a sleeve pinned to his coat, and Ben, who spent a month or 2 pretending his wound was nearly healed, then went to bed, then to his married sister Eunice as he saw the trouble he would cause his father, who'd lost a second wife and had no way to tend a son who had a full strength. It now seems certain Ben will never heal, who was so hale and strong when I first knew him. Yet I believe that if I act assured, he'll straighten out one day and be all right. Ben will keep living. Whereas if I show that I know too how slim his chances are, he'll die within a fortnight. So I smile and act encouraged by the faintest sign of progress and refuse to hear him talk about release from all our former vows, as if I could find comfort in another while Ben is still alive. 2 weeks ago, my father went to Lavelle for the day and came home to report that Robert Morgan is gaining reputation as a lawyer. He's never married, and with his father's death inherited some money, and more land than makes 3 farms of Lewis County size. Though folks have the kindness not to hint of things to make the sadness even harder, will I hang on to Ben and search each night to find a prayer to make him well again, without believing I'll ever find it, but fearing to begin the other prayers.
When he was born, I named him Benjamin Franklin, in honor of the man I most admired, hoping, I suppose, that he'd turn out to bear resemblance to the other one. I figured that I'd try to give him schooling, as I would give the farm to Levi when I found I was too old to carry on. And here I am at 60, courting you, with no thought that I can't last 30 years, while Levi has a farm from his bride's father, and all that I can do for Ben is see he has a Christian burial and a stone. Don't think me heartless speaking of my son so bluntly. I have grief enough to bear in knowing that I let him go to Eunice, the soldier lad who was my favorite child. But I've already seen 2 tiny sons, their mother, and a second wife besides, under a stone. Such losses in the course of things for one who owns a herd of cows or must depend for Sunday dinner on an axe kept in the tool shed by the hen house have made me more plain-spoken than some folks who live in town and never lost a child or a marriage mate or favorite horse. I've learned that things straighten out is the right way to be prepared when trouble strikes again, as strike it must for one who leads this life. When Levi asked me back in Eastertide whether I thought it right that he should marry when any day his brother might turn bad, I told him that at 31 he'd waited long enough. You need to think ahead, is what I told him as we scoured the milk room. If you were married today, you'd still be 40, or maybe more, before you had a boy to help you keep the farm. You won't spare Ben, but only lose good time if you delay your marriage just to show consideration. It seems to me that getting on with work, and pleasure too, is one way to avoid the kind of grief that saps the will and spirit, with no just compensation for the pain it takes to make such grief an honest thing. Moving straight through life with no more hope or fear than is allowed us in the book is how I choose to live, which doesn't mean I don't feel sorrow for the ones I've lost, or still may lose, but rather that I've found a way to face hard times and be content. I said this to the parson, who replied by pointing out that my name is not quite Asel, but rather Asahel, although we've lost the sound in common speech. He also said that if I studied Asel in the book, I'd see he lost his life by chasing straight for Abner when he might have turned aside, and for his pains was killed by Abner's spear, which passed straight through him as a minie ball did my poor Ben. Take heed, the parson said. Your neighbors know you for a thrifty farmer who pays his tithes and taxes and forbears to serve the devil-trading idle gossip or hanging out in tavern market day. You won't lose standing if you turn aside from duty something more than is your habit. Ben's not alone in having wounds to heal. That's what the parson said. He may be right, but still I think that what I need the most is rescue from the loneliness I feel with only one boy left me in the house, and he gone most nights after milking's done. We're both agreed we suit each other well, and as for your misgivings about Ben, it seems I might do better when I visit, produce more kindness by my idle talk, if once again I had a woman's softness to guide me when I try to cheer my boy, and give me comfort all the winter's nights that otherwise I'll spend alone with nothing but steady ticking of the kitchen clock or scurrying mice who live behind the wood box to break the silence. Twice before you've said you'll be my wife as soon as we can marry without reproach. Why can't that time be now? Who is there to reproach us with our haste? Or if there are a few, what does it matter? Tell me you'll grant it, thought, and try to find a way to give consent before more time is lost. I'm sorry if I've grown excited, but not completely sorry. After all, why shouldn't we be pleased to be this earnest at making plans for marriage at our age? Oh, I'm sorry again. Of course it was my age I meant. You really have no cause to feel you're not still young, nor that it is peculiar to wait until your age to think to marry. There. I've said enough tonight, I guess. I'll leave you now and come again this weekend. But in the meantime, give my plea some thought and make me happy when I see you next.
I never could quite make my ma believe that of my chums I put most trust in Ben, as one who would stick by me in all cases without the need for vows or fancy words that often seem to taint the things they touch. But Ma had her suspicions about Yankees, the name she gave to all the settled folks who didn't know about potato blight and came to Lewis County from down east, or went to church without it being mass. But I knew better, that Ben was just exactly what it seemed to be. Calm and happy, friendly and straightforward. Except the calm part quickly went away when horses came about. I never saw another man who loved him more than Ben. He had a horse in Sulky which he raced, bought with money earned and slowly saved. He told me once he started at 14 and waited nearly 7 years to own the rig that always came in second or third, not having money for a thoroughbred to challenge those that other men could buy. High-blooded fillies bought from Saratoga. He sold his rig the spring we joined the Army. And though he often spoke of how he hoped to race again and win after the war, all talk of horses ceased in those last years between his wounding at the Wilderness and funeral rites in spring of '68. So that was how I knew he wouldn't last, which made my visit to his sister's house a chore I dreaded more than dressing hogs. Yet Ben was such a chum I had to go, pretend that everything would soon come right, and act the man when nothing more remained except to lend him courage near the end. When I remember Ben, I don't think much of that time, any more than of the part of soldiering